Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Personality and Wholeness in Therapy, integrating 9 patterns of developmental pathways in clinical practice, by Daniel J. Siegel, MD and PDP Group. Narrated by Charles Constant. This title includes bonus material. To access, visit rbmediaglobal.com/audiobooks/search and search for the title. In the search results, click the title to visit the audiobook landing page. Access the PDF via the Download Bonus Material link under Downloads. Introduction. Welcome to an exploration of how we can understand the deep mechanisms of the mind within personality and use this perspective to promote therapeutic growth. As the first named author of this book, I, Dan, want to invite you to come along with me and my co-authors, Laura Baker, Ph.D., David Daniels, M.D., Denise Daniels, Ph.D., and Jack Killen, M.D., as we journey into an interpersonal neurobiology, IPNB, framework of the patterns of feeling, thought, and behavior that are the characteristics collectively known as personality. We'll be exploring how personality develops within the networks of the brain and our interpersonal relationships, and offer an in-depth approach in using this view in psychotherapy. Our scientific approach. This book is our attempt, as 5 scientists, 2 trained as empirical personality researchers, and 3 as physician scientists, with 2 of us being psychotherapists, to offer you a scientifically informed framework of personality and its application in psychotherapy. There is a tremendous amount of empirical scientific study needed to validate or disprove the framework we are proposing. IPNB is a transdisciplinary framework with insights into the mind and mental health based on the approach of consilience, seeking a common ground discovered independently by different disciplines about the nature of reality. We begin with a data set from what are called first-person reports from a popular view of personality known as the Enneagram, autobiographical reflections accumulated with systematic, semi-structured interviews that David and Helen Palmer oversaw for decades and that resulted in nearly 50,000 narrative accounts he obtained in his professional career. The Enneagram of Personality system describes 9 fundamental or core patterns of personality that each have unique ways of processing emotion, directing thought, and driving behavior. Becoming aware of these patterns is often described as being liberating and supportive of personal growth and interpersonal relationships. The Enneagram system is used by millions of individuals, as well as numerous therapists, coaches, and business leaders from around the world. Each of the core 9 Enneagram patterns is designated with a number, 1 to 9, and each has 3 subtypes as well, making a collection of 27 patterns of these fundamental features of personality. In this book, we'll be focusing on the core 9 personality patterns described in the Enneagram system and attempting to find a scientifically consilient way of understanding the development and experience of each of these patterns that shape our lives. While there are various historical views on how and when the system originated and was first described, with suggestions that elements have been articulated in religious, mathematical, and philosophical writings for many centuries, its most recent formalization was in the middle of the last century through the teachings of a Bolivian-born Chilean mystic, Oscar Ichazo, and a Chilean-American psychiatrist, Claudio Naranjo. Naranjo directly taught a number of students in Berkeley, California, in the 1970s, including Helen Palmer. The exploration of this system of viewing personality that David Daniels carried out with Helen Palmer in an organization and approach they co-founded, now known as the Narrative Enneagram, has led to the accumulation of inner reflections on these patterns of feeling, thinking, and behaving that serve as our starting place of a data set. The gathering of these first-person or subjective reports into an assembled set is what we in science call second-person data. This means we've listened closely to what individuals have stated about their lived experience. And rather than just having a singular case report, something that has at times been called me-search and not research, we have thousands of these reports. Now our task is to look at third-person data, meaning objective findings from other ways of studying reality, such as through neural structure and function. By examining patterns of personality and how these develop along certain pathways, we come to an exciting and useful view that we formally call Patterns of Developmental Pathways, or PDP. This is a clinically useful, scientifically informed framework. We propose a possible developmental trajectory for personality, but even without that lifespan view, the ideas here are still useful for working with clients in the present moment of their lives. While the PDP is useful, at this moment in the development of this PDP framework, we do not yet have direct studies of whole population distributions, statistical analyses of the various factors distinguishing one pathway from another, or structural and functional studies of the human brain revealing neural correlates for the various propensities of personality we'll be exploring. Even with more academically established Big Five traits of personality, specific characteristics do not yet have fully accepted clear associations with different brain structures and functions. Why go further, you might be wondering, if we don't have that direct set of findings empirically validated with third-person approaches? As a clinician, my use of consilient approaches in IPNB has been profoundly helpful in creating new approaches to psychotherapy that offer creative and effective means of helping individuals with a range of challenges. In taking that same consilient approach here in examining personality, I hope you will find for your work and your life that the IPNB-based PDP framework that we have assembled is also something that is both useful and based on a cross-disciplinary truth. Here in Personality and Wholeness in Therapy, we have been devoted to balancing what we've learned from the accumulated narratives and what we are correlating with neural mechanisms of empirical science. We acknowledge that this is a proposal for a theoretical perspective, one in need of empirical research to validate its accuracy and details. But as clinicians, David and I have found this consilient view quite useful in our therapeutic practices, and we hope you will too. Please keep in mind that this is a scientifically informed, consilient, practical, and effective way of considering how the inner process of early temperament moves ahead in our lives to shape personality. It also is a framework that reveals how attachment and other key experiences in our lives shape how temperament influences our personality across the lifespan. Yet while these developmental aspects of the PDP framework are plausible and testable, the usefulness of this approach is independent of what ultimately is shown to be the valid trajectory leading to the emergence of personality in adult life. The reason we are offering this hypothetical developmental account of the PDP is to provide a plausible and testable view for both science-based clinical practice and the research community. We hope that this effort will bolster the case that understanding these 9 patterns of personality deserves mainstream attention and study. Very importantly, the claim that the patterns are useful does not rest on the validity of this particular account of its lifespan development. We correlate brain research on the nature of attention, motivation, and emotion with the autobiographical reports and offer a framework that is a hypothesis, not in any way proven. What this means is that it might be accurate, it might be partially true, or it might be wholly false. The reason we are offering this hypothetical framework is that as scientists and clinicians, we see the potential for this perspective to inspire new and direct applications that can help people's lives. As individuals, too, we certainly have found this to be quite helpful, but that does not make this scientifically proven. Now that you know the context and limitations of this framework, please take in whatever you find useful for your own work and life, and see how it all sits with you as we go forward into the exciting details of the developmental, affective, and social neuroscience insights into personality. Challenges in life, including non-secure attachment relationships early on, can intensify how a given personality pathway ingrains itself in the individual's way of living. In this manner, under some developmental circumstances, your clients may present with a pathway of a certain cohesion of traits, in how they feel, think, and act, that may have become more like a prison that, with liberation and integration, can be transformed into a playground in their lives. The goal of therapy is then not to eliminate a pathway, but to make that particular set of proclivities more flexible and functional, and to enable access to other strategies of living to allow differentiation and linkage, the process of integration, to be freed. Integration enables a life of harmony to emerge, one characterized by flexibility, adaptability, coherence, energy, and stability. This Phases flow is what opening up the patterns of developmental pathways entails. As we'll soon see, the experience of feeling whole that emerges from such integration is part of what the lifelong journey of one's developmental pathways may in fact be all about. It is our hope, Laura's, David's, Denise's, Jack's, and mine, that your experience listening to this book summarizing our 2 decades-long work together, intermittently over these years in the intensity of our focus, will bring a sense of wholeness to your life and to the lives of those with whom you work. We actually decided to publish an outline of the PDP framework back in 2010 in a chapter on traits in The Mindful Therapist, which I wrote for the Norton IPNB series. In that chapter were the essentials of this approach. Since then, David and I have used this PDP framework in both therapy and lectures. Jack has been offering PDP-focused workshops since then as well. Jack published a paper at that time, too, for the Enneagram Journal. This book elaborates on those prior publications and offers the first comprehensive deep dive into the patterns of developmental pathways framework for clinicians. Laura and Jack contributed in important ways to the final explorations and expressions of these ideas in book form, Laura offering her wisdom as both a personality researcher and certified teacher of Iyengar Yoga, and Jack bringing his scientific rigor from years of overseeing research projects at the National Institutes of Health, NIH. Each provided inspiration in having us all take in the latest empirical findings from a range of fields with both curiosity and precision. Laura has brought to the team a deep scientific background and a wisdom in maintaining a powerful conceptual clarity in our discussions and keeping us all organized and goal-directed. All of this was on top of an active academic career studying personality and behavioral genetics as a tenured professor, actively pursuing research in these areas. Jack brought more than 2 decades of NIH experience organizing and managing multidisciplinary research programs, most recently focused on unconventional medical and behavioral interventions that might have merit and deserve rigorous study. Jack also brought to the team a deep narrative Enneagram-grounded understanding of the Enneagram system and practice, a scientific precision and curiosity honed in his NIH career, and a relentless and inspiring push for creative, out-of-the-box thinking about traditional Enneagram teaching and what might be going on beneath these patterns from a biological perspective. Jack and Laura were instrumental in the development of our thinking about the underlying dynamics of these fascinating patterns in action. We worked together as a group of 5 for over a dozen years until David's passing in 2017. Since then, the now 4-member PDP group has worked diligently to articulate what we hope is an accurate and useful model that will have utility for personal growth, clinical strategies for lifespan applications, and future research design. Denise, with her training at the interface of environment and genetics and her deep transpersonal focus, kept us all attentive to the important bridge between the psychological and spiritual aspects of traditional narrative Enneagram teaching. As David's daughter, Denise has been a powerful source of access to all of David's literary estate, providing important input honoring her father's lifelong achievements and the narrative approach to the Enneagram. Denise has played an essential role in keeping us all attentive to the traditional Enneagram system and David's teachings about it, while at the same time serving as a deep inspiration for us all to blend scientific rigor with the important ways in which classical empirical science has limitations that should not be ignored. Denise may have been the first one of us to articulate the idea that we work together as a group to formulate this new understanding of the Enneagram. With Denise's essential role, we hope that this summary of our years of collaboration will honor these many dimensions of Enneagram teachings and David's legacy. Naturally, the intricate and historical teachings of the Enneagram of personality have many features that interest practitioners to various degrees, and this is true for the individuals of our PDP group as well. We have collectively chosen to use the consilient science-informed approach of IPNB in order to begin the important and, we feel, useful effort to find the common ground between rigorous empirical findings in attachment research and neuroscience studies, for example, and traditional Enneagram teachings. In this text, unless otherwise specified, when we use the term Enneagram, we will be referring to this particular view of forms of personality, not the broader spiritual, philosophical, and even mathematical concepts also associated with the term. This consilient effort to explore personality has meant that at this moment in the PDP framework, we very intentionally focus on what can be illuminated with existing science, and that has necessitated that we focus on the developmental origins and present moment experiences of personality, as they can illuminate the narratives of the core 9 types in the Enneagram system. With work in psychotherapy and workshops, we also have extensive experience of how the PDP approach has been useful in helping cultivate personal growth. There is much, much more in the Enneagram system than we are currently able to address in this book. So for a deep dive into those areas, please see some of the existing literature on that perspective. While David was not alive at the initiation of this book's formal writing, we have chosen to include his own words directly in places in this text to honor his membership in the creation of the PDP model. We dedicate this book to his life and legacy. We know that he would be as excited as we are to share our common love of understanding the mind and bringing well-being to people's lives. Why focus on personality in psychotherapy? Our hope is to add to the extensive field of personality theorizing and offer what we hope you'll find to be a novel, accessible, and practical interpersonal neurobiology approach to both understanding and working with personality in psychotherapy. While mainstream psychiatry, in which I was initially trained, focuses on personality disorders, and generally not on personality itself, the broader field of mental health has a robust set of theories about personality that offers a range of models from which to draw ideas about our enduring ways of feeling, thinking, and behaving. You may be a therapist grounded in what is known as personality dynamics and already draw your insights from that interdisciplinary view of personality in your practice of psychotherapy. What we will explore here can complement that important work you are already doing. In personality dynamics, many frameworks are explored from a wide sampling of theorists, such as Allport, Cattell, McAdams, Mischel, and Shota, and of approaches such as cognitive affective personality systems, knowledge and appraisal personality architecture framework, nonlinear interaction of person and situation model, whole trait theory, and narrative identity. With all of this existing theory, why would we need yet another model of personality? The developmental affective neuroscience foundations included in this PDP model, we hope you'll find, offer a unique and powerful way of understanding personality. And we also hope that you will discover that its practical applications for psychotherapy will provide useful ways of helping people experience more fulfilling lives as they work with you on their therapeutic journeys. If you have ever wondered how personality shapes our perceptions and interactions with the world, and nudges us to perceive the world and act in certain ways, this book will offer some new inroads into how that may develop through the lens of how the embodied brain and our relational lives intersect to shape who we are. If you are like me, you may sometimes bristle at the notion of categories of personality that limit us rather than liberate us. As the neuroscience and adolescent brain researcher Sarah Blakemore has commented on her studies, one conclusion is that individual differences are just as significant as, perhaps even more important than, averages. After all, there's no average teenager. Balancing this individual approach to who we are and the pattern detection effort to seek common ground across individuals will be at the heart of our efforts. The narratives that David acquired focusing on the Enneagram give us insight into both what is shared by and what is unique for individuals. How does personality correlate with brain systems as they grow from our earliest days? How might these neural networks of personality actually be helping us or sometimes getting in the way of our leading a more fulfilling life? Does personality reveal our true selves, or does it cover something up, making us fall asleep to some fundamental essence of who we really are? We all may have questions about how personality is formed and also how it might be changed, and to what extent, in the journeys of our personal and professional lives. This book will offer responses to each of these questions. Over 20 years ago, I was introduced to a popular personality system that described 9 specific patterns of the mind that tend to repeat in somewhat predictable ways, both over time and across a range of situations. What was particularly fascinating, and in many ways unique, was the inside reflection of that view and the ways people seemed to find that the perspective illuminated deep truths about their inner lives that were quite helpful to them. These inner patterns were also matched with tendencies of outer behaviors. In meeting as 5 science-trained individuals sharing an interest in that system, we decided to spend what has now become 2 decades focusing our collective study of this Enneagram personality system and translating some of that view into what we came to call patterns of developmental pathways, PDPs. If you're familiar with the details of the Enneagram system, you'll find here that we will focus on only some of its foundational features, especially those regarding the core 9 types of personality you are likely well aware of from other sources and books on this topic. To explore a neuroscience basis for these 9 patterns, we have examined many aspects of science, from attachment research to developmental neurobiology, in an effort to find a common ground between traditional Enneagram teachings and empirically validated data. This effort to find consilience, how separately discovered truths from disparate approaches to reality share discoveries in common, has led to a hypothesis about how these 9 patterns form, what neural pathways are involved, and how they might be cultivated in psychotherapy. Even though in this book we will not be directly focusing on some of the details of the Enneagram, such as wings, connecting points, or instinctual subtypes, the PDP framework offers insights and explanations regarding those areas as well, and they are being pursued by some of the PDP group. Resources exploring those features are abundant in the contemporary literature and include writings by our co-author David Daniels, Don Riso and Russ Hudson, Helen Palmer, and Beatrice Chestnut, as well as other classic Enneagram texts offering a comprehensive discussion of these issues. Why would we, as 5 trained scientists, be attempting to uncover the possible scientifically based mechanisms that might be the foundations of these distinct patterns of personality? In our own personal and professional lives, these 9 pathways our development can follow seem to have robust influences on our lives. Not only do they correlate with scientifically discovered neural networks in the brain, but understanding them greatly facilitates the process of change and growth in psychotherapy. Could these correlations with neural development we've uncovered actually be accurate? Might the conceptual and scientific foundations we'll explore here hold up to careful future empirical studies that might use these proposals in their design and implementation? We certainly hope so. But as we await such controlled research projects, the practical utility of this new view of personality can be attained in your own life and work as a clinician. In this book, I'd like your experience of listening to be as direct and useful as possible. As I don't know the name you were given, I will refer to you with the open term you, just as I'll use the terms I for me, Dan, and we for the whole PDP group of Laura, David, Denise, Jack, and me. Since we are 5 authors for 1 listener, it has naturally been challenging in the writing to find a common, singular voice for us to connect with you. For that reason, I've been asked to take the helm and have been given the privilege and challenge of having the 5 of us bring these ideas together over many years, then taking that group effort and attempting to carefully articulate our experiences and perspectives in the form of a final manuscript. Our goal has been to synthesize this exciting new perspective on who we human beings are and offer you a way to make this both understandable and useful to your life and work. An intriguing invitation. I wrote a book exploring the overlap between innate and experiential aspects of neural development and how they shape the emergence of the mind, the developing mind, that also proposed the framework of interpersonal neurobiology, IPNB, an interdisciplinary framework for understanding the mind and mental health. After that book was out in the world, I received a call from Doctors David and Denise Daniels, a father-daughter pair. David was a clinical professor of psychiatry at Stanford, working with a popular personality system known as the Enneagram. Denise, a scientist who had received her PhD on the gene-environment interplay in the development of personality. They came to a workshop I was offering, and we were having lunch when they suggested that I had not paid enough attention to how child temperament might shape how we develop into our personality as adults. I agreed that as an attachment researcher I was focused on the relational aspects of parent-child pairs, and knew that research revealed how temperament did not predict future outcomes with much statistical power. Yes, they agreed, but they were both interested in a system of personality that might offer some new insights from the inside out, looking inward at personality rather than merely at its outward manifestations, which were what current approaches to temperament primarily assessed. They wanted to know if I was interested in learning more. I had also already published another book, Parenting from the Inside Out, with Mary Hartzell, with the subtitle, How a Deeper Self-Understanding Can Help You Raise Children Who Thrive, so this invitation made my ears perk up. What was it in me that was open to learning about this system of personality? Perhaps I had an elevated score on the openness of my Big Five personality traits, high on wanting to be conscientious, too, to help IPNB be as comprehensive as possible in taking in the consilient perspectives, the findings that reveal a common ground across different pursuits of knowledge. I didn't think of myself as an extrovert, and not really an introvert, so maybe I was the mixture of the two as an ambivert. But I was open to David and Denise's invitation to come spend a week as a scientist, with 50 others who would gather to explore the narrative Enneagram together at a retreat center in Northern California. My trait of being agreeable must have been high for David and Denise to extend that kind invitation, and yet my certainly high neuroticism trait made me immediately doubt the value of going, question why I agreed to attend, and then fret about how I might fit in with the group as a scientist in a gathering focusing on such a popularized view of personality as the Enneagram. I was a scientist, after all, so what could such a view provide? Should I go, or should I call and say I was too busy? Research in the field of personality had already assessed the Big Five factors that, at the time, were one of the most academically established sets of features that currently dominated our research-based understanding of personality. They also form a memorable acronym, OCEAN. This mnemonic device helps us easily recall the traits of being open versus closed, conscientious versus not thoughtful, extroverted versus introverted, agreeable versus disagreeable, and neurotic versus clear-minded and calm. Could my hesitancy to try out a new system, the Enneagram, be some reflection of my characteristics of the Big Five? Was it my possibly high neuroticism trait that left me with anything but being calm and clear-minded? Well, my ocean traits were simply what they were, however they may have formed. Studies show that about 40% of such personality traits are heritable. We inherit them from our parents' genetic makeup, and the rest of the variance is often explained by what are called non-shared or individual environmental factors. Classically, this is known as our nature, genetics, and our nurture, experience. However they came about, what could I do about them anyway? What intrigued me about the Enneagram system was something about its postulating that there was something you might do to gain inner wisdom about how to move from lower states of functioning to more adaptive, higher states. From the more academically established view of personality of the Big Five, what would that system offer as an understanding of how I got to be who I tend to be? And what would these ocean characteristics, as accurate as they might be, offer as a way to guide my personal development or my work as a psychotherapist? With all these questions in mind, and with these particular characteristics of my personality in my awareness from mainstream personality studies, with both apprehension and determination, I got on an airplane and headed north to see if I might expand my experiential understanding of our lives. A loyal skeptic. When I arrived at the Vallombrosa Retreat Center for that week-long workshop, I was a bit late and was greeted by David Daniels and Helen Palmer, his co-founder of the educational program, The Narrative Enneagram. They asked which of the 9 types I resonated with, and I said that I had read David's book, The Essential Enneagram, and that I only knew which type I was certainly not. They each asked me some brief questions, following up responses I gave them with more detailed inquiries, and then conferred with each other briefly and proclaimed, "You might be a 6, like us." I thought inside my inner mind, how ridiculous, and how biased of them. But I was loyal to trying to find a possible consilience amid what seemed to me, on first take, to be unfounded views, or at least confusing divisions into types. Then I remembered that the name of a 6 in David's terminology was a loyal skeptic. The workshop was organized in a panel structure. Of the 50 people from around the world who had flown in to study their own and others' Enneagram types, those who were of a given type would all be together up on a panel and interviewed with open-ended questions organized by the approach of the Enneagram in the narrative tradition. Stories were evoked, hence the narrative name of their approach, and in those autobiographical reflections on the inner life would be revealed fascinating patterns of where attention would tend to go, what had inner meaning to the individual, characteristic ways of responding to emotionally distressing events, and how an inner focus of attention, emotion, and meaning would emerge as outwardly manifest, observable behaviors. I was extremely doubtful of the whole process. A cult, I thought, a sham of something that had any meaning, perhaps just a groupthink coalescence of opinions seeking some kind of false internal validation, and certainly something with no scientific backing, nor any seemingly useful clinical applications. Then my type was called up for the panel. There I was, sitting with half a dozen or so others who had self-assessed as belonging to this type, this 6 grouping. As people responded to the interviewer's questions, it was as if the others were reading my mind. Every response they gave I could resonate with, and sometimes it was an uncanny tip-of-the-tongue sense that they took the words right out of my mouth before I could say them. I was a bit in shock. As I listened later to the other panels, very few of their responses resonated with me, and even the observable ways people tended to act, their non-verbal behaviors, seemed to have similarities as I watched their interactions on the panels. I was given the informal research opportunity to offer the whole group the Adult Attachment Interview, AAI, a research instrument I had been trained to use during my National Institute of Mental Health Research Training Fellowship. And then I had discussions with the participants afterward about their responses. It did not seem that the state of mind with respect to attachment that the AAI reveals correlated with a particular type or another, but rather that the degree to which a type was intense or imprisoning, the way that type's characteristics were trapping a person in unhelpful patterns of feeling, thought, and behavior seemed, in my informal initial impression, to be what correlated to the AAI findings of secure or non-secure states of mind. In other words, when people shared their AAI reflections with me during the week, the 4 possible groupings of the AAI did not correlate with the 9 groupings of the Enneagram. If future research could be conducted, we could explore the validity of the following impressionistic notion. Attachment security or non-security did not determine the personality features themselves, but rather may influence how those features exerted an influence in the individual's life. This view is conciliant with the findings that attachment could shape the external manifestation of behavioral inhibition later in life, perhaps by cortical growth in response to experience, even as that attachment did not create that inhibition earlier in life in the first place. In other words, it might be that one's temperament derived from subcortical innate proclivities, but attachment patterns might be cortically mediated strategies learned as a skill of adaptation. That was the hypothesis emerging in my mind during that initial workshop. Could science illuminate the inner nature of personality and the Enneagram? At that workshop, I was also given the opportunity to interview whole groups of individuals of a given Enneagram type. That system involves 9 distinct types, each with a number designation and a name, each an equally valid way of experiencing life and the world, simply different from one another. One type is not better or worse than another. Each type is simply distinct in ways that seem to endure over time. For example, a dining table full of those in the 8 category, the protector, shared with me that their journey to being an enlightened 8 involved coming to address 2 important features in their lives. One was that each of them at the table said they could not stand to be vulnerable or acknowledge their dependence on others. The second common experience was that they were challenged in the skills of empathy and insight, 2 components of a process I had named in earlier writings as mindsight. These were very caring people, it seemed, but caring about others was different from understanding others or themselves. What this revealed is that while those of a type might share a common ground, there was a developmental pathway of self-understanding and personal growth that could be facilitated by addressing the particular challenges of an unactualized stance. With intention and knowledge, that challenge could be addressed, and then a shift in how a person could live their life could be cultivated. That made sense to me as an outsider to the Enneagram world, was fascinating to me as a scientist imagining what the mechanisms might be of the types patterns, and was useful to me as a psychotherapist, always seeking new ways to offer helpful skills to those with whom I worked. And as a person, a parent, and a partner, knowing about these types and their features was profoundly illuminating. Hanging out at a dining room table with those of my own grouping, 6, the loyal skeptics, I found it amazing how similar we were in various ways of having worst-case scenario thinking and always checking for danger, even though on the surface we were such different people. When I called my wife to tell her about what I was learning about myself, she wasn't surprised at all, given that we had been living together for 2 decades. The recurrent challenge of finding calmness amid a deep sense of mistrust and fear was rewarding and relieving to discuss with that group of like-minded individuals. These intriguing findings, along with the adult attachment interview impressions that attachment did not create type but could shape one's personality as either a prison or a playground, felt deeply compelling to me. I was skeptical, naturally, it turns out, given the possible validity of this personality pattern I seemed to be in, but I still wanted to know more. At a different dining table, I found another common type grouping in which I fit. The other scientists present at the workshop had gathered for a meal. There I met up with David and Denise Daniels and 2 other workshop participants, Laura Baker and Jack Killen. Laura had trained with Denise and was a professor of psychology at the University of Southern California, studying personality. Jack was a medical scientist working at the National Institutes of Health Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. Each of them was personally interested in the Enneagram. David applied his personal insights into this personality system as a practicing psychiatrist. As scientists, we shared our interest in the possible underlying mechanisms that might be revealed if we were to study individuals in the various Enneagram type groupings. David had numerous narrative reports, thousands of them. I was trained as a narrative scientist. Laura and Denise were personality scientists, and Jack was adept at analyzing research on non-traditional approaches to Western science that might just have merit and be effective in helping others. And we shared a similar sense of humor. We each felt that there was something there in this approach to understanding human beings. We also felt that while the popular discussions of the Enneagram system itself were not based in science, there might be new ways we could discover a satisfying and accurate developmental approach to understanding how temperament might persist from the inside as adult personality. That developmental question was intriguing to each of us, and my background in focusing on IPNB as a cross-disciplinary framework for understanding the mind and mental health, as well as reality itself, might serve as a useful scientific and conceptual foundation to explore our shared interests further. I imagine that we each had the ocean features that would enable us to begin a collaboration back in 2004 that now, 20 years later, has come to fruition in the creation of this book. Laura, David, Denise, Jack, and I would meet a few times each year to explore our common interests. We tried out all sorts of ways of understanding the Enneagram through a variety of scientific frameworks. The initial forays were fun, yet hit frustrating dead ends. We'd abandon our various early attempts to correlate existing empirical scientific views with the narratives of Enneagram types. We then came upon some work by a number of authors, especially that of Jaak Panksepp, which provided a view of the subcortical motivational drives that, in our view, overlapped in fascinating and exciting ways with the Enneagram system. The structure of the book. In the first 5 chapters, the book focuses on scientific and conceptual foundations of this model. And then in the last 6 chapters, it explores therapeutic applications of the model in the process of psychotherapy. Although the Enneagram view of personality from which our narrative data source is derived is already being used by a fair number of therapists and counselors around the world, we are introducing a new science-based developmental and neurobiological framework for understanding and working with personality called Patterns of Developmental Pathways, or PDP. This is a whole-person inner perspective of personality with a coherent developmental foundation in terms of its origins and its applications. The PDP framework helps clinicians and clients get underneath the hood of personality and behavior to identify the motivations driving these patterns, and it provides a model of growth and change of personality in psychotherapy. We will approach the journey of this book by building the conceptual foundations of temperament, attachment, and personality step by step, and then we will explore the specifics of each of the patterns of developmental pathways, diving deeply into each pathway and highlighting the strengths, challenges, and growth edges that can be utilized in the course of psychotherapy. The first 3 chapters cover Big Idea Number 1, the notion that understanding and working with personality can indeed be clinically useful using the PDP framework, since the system goes beyond the surface traits to reveal what is inside and underneath the external manifestations of personality. In Chapter 1, we will introduce the PDP framework of personality and why we think it is useful for clients to help them foster their inner development, enhance their relationships with others, and cultivate a more flexible and fulfilling way of life, and for therapists to help them be better attuned to themselves and their clients on cognitive, emotional, and somatic levels. Chapter 2 outlines the specific components or processes that make up the scaffolding of the patterns, while Chapter 3 fills in the details of each of the 9 personality patterns, the PDPs, in terms of these components. We will be using the terms PDP, pattern, and pathway somewhat interchangeably to indicate aspects of this set of characteristics that cluster together and shape our lives in what we broadly call our personality. The term pattern highlights what is happening now, while pathway refers more to what occurs across time and contexts. And by personality, we do not mean the energy or charisma a person has, such as, oh, they have such a personality, but rather the very specific finding that we have enduring patterns of emotion, thought, and behavior that stay with us across settings and stages of our lives. Big Idea Number 2, our developmental hypothesis of how the patterns might emerge from infancy and develop across the lifespan to become adaptive strategies that make up personality, is presented in Chapter 4. In Chapter 5, we'll explore in more depth our Big Idea Number 3 on the importance of wholeness as a driving force beneath personality patterns, and how the PDP framework can be used to help clients integrate, restore, and experience the benefits of growth through the process of psychotherapy. Once you are familiar with the 9 personality patterns and their working components explored in Chapter 3, getting a feeling for them and even reflecting on how they may correspond with your own personal life experience, you will be ready for the deep dive in later chapters. Here we'll explore the patterns in more depth, offering some of the direct words regarding the Enneagram of our late co-author David Daniels, as well as my own insights into how the PDP framework can provide new opportunities to lead clients toward greater integration and wholeness. Beginning with chapters 6, 7, and 8 and their subchapters, we'll explore concepts perhaps familiar to those who know the implications of developmental neurobiology in the helping and healing professions, but here we'll focus on how they relate to integrating the pathways in therapy and how this framework can become integrated into the process of psychotherapy. We'll review some basic IPNB notions about integration itself and how these may relate to the Enneagram as approaches to growth. I then bring the Enneagram and the PDP frameworks to you through David's words and my reflections. We will dive deeply into the specific patterns in these chapters, one section exploring each of the 9 pathways, including a focus on individual and relationship development and growth of more integrative ways of living our lives with freedom. In the final synthesizing chapters 9, 10, and 11, we conclude by revisiting the importance of therapist know thyself and the theme of working toward wholeness in psychotherapy using the PDP framework. Here in Personality and Wholeness in Therapy, you will find a detailed explanation of what we hope you'll come to experience as a highly accessible and clinically useful framework of personality and its development across the lifespan. While the PDP framework was initially inspired by the tens of thousands of narratives offered in Enneagram of personality workshops and our attempt to find an interpersonal neurobiology perspective on those life stories, it is exciting to find that the PDP view is conciliant with more recent proposals for an integrative theory of motivation, personality, and development offered by psychology professor and researcher Carol Dweck. In Dweck's review of the academic studies of personality and temperament, ones that do not involve the Enneagram, she came to similar hypotheses as to the central importance of key motivations that underlie the development of personality, ones that overlap with those you will be exploring throughout the journey ahead. This consilience points to the notion that the PDP framework may offer an accurate and universal model of personality and its development that is consistent with both rigorous empirical explorations of personality and the subjective reports from those exploring the Enneagram system. Utilizing the PDP model can help clients promote inner development, enhance their interpersonal relationships, and adopt a freer, more flexible, and fulfilling way of life. We also hope that loosening the sometimes tight grip of personality can help individuals realize our deep connections with one another in our human family and our fundamental belonging to all of nature. Yes, our work as therapists is to support the well-being of individuals and families. And yes, when that therapeutic journey supports people thriving, it can invite an expanded sense of self, a more integrated identity, and a broader belonging that can support the health of our wider waiting world. The Patterns of Developmental Pathways, PDP framework, will offer you a powerful proposal about how personality emerges in our lives and what we can do with these insights to enable these enduring ways we feel, think, and behave to become less restricting and more freeing. The scientific and conceptual foundations you'll explore in the first 5 chapters of this book will provide an in-depth discussion of the model. The therapeutic applications of this framework in the next 5 chapters will give you the tools to utilize this approach in practical ways to cultivate integration and growth in psychotherapy. We welcome you to the journey ahead. Personality and Wholeness in Therapy. Chapter 1. 3 Fundamental Ideas. Welcome to a scientifically informed proposal about how to make sense of the patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior that are often simply called personality. We'll be drawing upon thousands of narrative reflections that provide an inner view of those processes, and then we'll apply the lens of science in attempting to both make sense of them and propose a neuroscience-informed view of how personality may originate and carry forward in our lifespan development. The Patterns of Developmental Pathways framework also helps us to understand how psychotherapy can catalyze positive growth in therapeutic change. The study of personality is hardly new. As Louis Breger, psychologist and former associate professor at California Institute of Technology, suggests in his academic text, From Instinct to Identity, The Development of Personality, the development of human personality is one of those grand topics, the concern of philosophers, novelists, psychologists, and theologians, not to mention parents, for centuries. All cultures and societies contain beliefs or theories about the psychological development of their people. Such beliefs or theories, which are usually not stated in any formal sense, are embodied in child-rearing practices, social institutions such as schools, beliefs about human nature, man's instincts, and how they can be legitimately expressed or how they must be controlled, the sorts of expectations held for children, and a host of other ideas, laws, values, and social practices. Such views enable parents to raise their children and institutions to influence them, so that they become functioning members of their societies. Here in Personality and Wholeness in Therapy, we'll explore a view of fundamental patterns in the processing of information and energy that we believe provides an accurate and clinically useful framework for understanding personality. We are adding to this long history in the study of and reflection on personality. One objective of this model is to provide a novel translation of the Enneagram in ways that are scientifically grounded and clinically useful. This PDP model offers a whole-person, inside perspective of personality that gets beneath behavior to the motivation that underlies the observable patterns. Understanding the likely neural networks that develop early in life and continue to influence these patterns of personality can help make sense of the tangle of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors that clients bring to therapy. This perspective can be useful in providing a framework for clients' individual inner self-development and growth, as well as for their relationships with others, their relational self, thus leading to a more flexible and fulfilling way of life. Importantly, our framework also provides a unique opportunity for the therapist to know thyself, which can in turn lead to a more effective therapeutic approach. It's important to note, here at the beginning, that the simple word self can be viewed as a center of experience. In this linguistic use of this common term, we want to emphasize that the center of experience, sensation, perspective, and agency, SPA, can be experienced within our body, inner self, and in our relationships with other people and the planet, relational self. Our identity lens can adjust to zoom in on our inner self and expand out to our connections with people and nature as our relational self. Know thyself is an old phrase about knowing the inner self, but we can also use that same term in the expanded sense to remind us that truly knowing who we are invites us to explore an expanded sense of who we are beyond the individualistic view of a solo self. Going inside our mental lives is an opportunity to develop our mind-sight skills. The PDP framework offers a comprehensive inside-out view that facilitates that journey of discovery. We are not aware of any other developmental neuroscience and attachment-informed model of personality that offers the opportunity to see what's underneath the hood and provides a framework for growth and change for both the therapist and client. The PDP model. 3 key ideas. This is a client-friendly clinical framework to help address the kinds of recurring problems in which individuals may often ask, "Why in the world do I keep doing this?" A first principle is that the PDP perspective provides a clinically useful neurobiologically informed framework of personality that can greatly aid in unique ways toward understanding ourselves and our relationships with others. This framework also provides a way for therapists to know themselves on a deeper level, how their own personality comes into play when working with clients. These ways of gaining insight into personality offer a powerful and fresh perspective for psychotherapists utilizing an array of modalities in their work. Therapists can use this framework as an exciting and effective new developmental neuroscience-informed approach to therapy and therapeutic change as they become attuned to themselves and their clients. Second, the PDP framework proposes a much-needed lifespan model of personality that fills a void in linking infant and child temperament to adult personality. The science-based consilient basis for our hypothesis of how these personality patterns emerge from infancy can be linked to Kenneth Davis and Jaak Panksepp's work found in The Emotional Foundations of Personality, another text in this IPNB series. The PDP framework links 3 primal emotion systems explored in Panksepp's lifelong work in affective neuroscience, anger, separation, distress, and fear, with the infant's needs in 3 domains we call agency, bonding, and certainty. These 3 distinct subcortical motivational networks, when the drive is frustrated, each activate their respective primary affects of anger, separation, distress, and fear. Third, we believe that the main driver of the development of personality across the lifespan involves the seeking of a sense of wholeness. This is a drive for a feeling that has a range of ways of being experienced and expressed, such as coherence, completion, contentment, or connection. A seeking of wholeness may be a driving impetus that organizes individuals into certain patterns of both inner experience and outwardly manifest behavior. By itself, having a sense of something being whole with that feeling of being complete, of feeling at ease and content, of being connected, would be an understandable state to be motivated to achieve, especially when considered in contrast to its opposite of being incomplete, with dis-ease and disconnection. The PDP model posits that infant temperament and early life experiences shape the differences in the relative activation of specific subcortical motivational circuits that then create enduring patterns in what has priority in our mental life as development unfolds. Part of the activation of these motivational networks is to try, as best we can, to come to feel whole, complete, connected, content, with a sense of balance and homeostasis. Temperament can be considered an early aspect of an infant's propensities, shaped primarily by neural proclivities and firing patterns. As an infant experiences life, this inner temperament forms a kind of filter that directly shapes what sensory input is attended to and how our emotional and physiological responses emerge. In a sense, temperament serves to select from a wide array of what is possible and filters those possibilities into what is most probable. In this very foundational way, temperament is a template for the filter that selectively screens how we subjectively sense life and how we objectively behave in the world. It is these proclivities of temperament and how we learn to have strategies of adaptation to experiences, and even to our own responses to them, that form the characteristics of our personality. In a simple equation, features of temperament plus our adaptive strategies lead to our personality patterns. Recurring neural activations will create their own synaptic reinforcements, strengthening an initial and perhaps subtle propensity into a more robust network of interconnected neurons. This, we propose, is how temperament forms an initial bias of the neural system, a filtering process that selects what is being attended to and given more energy and intention, and that then reinforces its own initial leanings. The PDP view also proposes that attachment relationships in which we grow then shape the level of integration, or how well these emerging patterns of temperament and adaptive strategies lead to what we can name as high versus low levels of functioning of these patterns. Low levels mean we are challenged to adapt well with these patterns. High levels mean we can adapt and function well. We can think of this as how suboptimal attachment may deepen and narrow the groove of a neural pathway that temperament initially sets in motion. When that neural groove is very deep and narrow, other more flexible ways of responding become less easily accessed, and the individual's personality may become more intense and less adaptive. Psychotherapy may help a person move toward higher levels of functioning through a process of integration, the linking of differentiated parts of a system as it widens the groove of a PDP. Ultimately, understanding personality seen through this model as PDPs, patterns of developmental pathways, can provide a framework for growth and change, a guide to becoming more integrated as clients learn to recognize and then relax their patterns. This integrative transformation allows them and us to find ways of aspiring to cognitive and emotional higher capacities within and across other patterns. These higher states of functioning enable us to be more fluid and flexible, less trapped in a singular neural groove, and more capable of accessing a wider range of more adaptive functions with freedom. Wholeness, personality, and development. During my college education studying biochemistry, I also had the opportunity to work on a suicide prevention phone service, and was assigned various repeat callers to support their lives. I noticed that certain repeating patterns of ways of feeling and dealing with emotion, particular enduring ways of thinking and reasoning about life's challenges, and specific recurrent behavioral strategies of coping with life, were distinctly present in the various individuals I had the privilege to work with on those calls. There was a sense I would feel in these callers that something was off, something missing from leading a vibrant, whole life. That sense of wholeness, a feeling of being fundamentally connected to someone or something that felt complete and coherent, seemed to be missing. I wondered how the experience of one's personality might be related in some ways to this sense of being whole. The psychache, a term coined by Ed Schneidman, the founder of the field of suicidology, might be the feeling that this something of the psyche, the soul, the mind was missing in an individual's existence. When I went through medical school training, I also noticed that my peers had distinct and enduring patterns of feeling, thinking, and behaving that pretty much stayed with them for the first 2 years of our indoctrination into the medical profession. As we went on in our training, though we had different personalities, the pain of that experience, which led to an empirically documented diminishment in empathy in young doctors and an accompanying increase in their emotional distress, was also a kind of departure from wholeness. Years later, at our 40th medical school reunion, those same patterns of what we simply call personality seemed to continue in their ways of being in the world after 4 decades of living. When I finished my initial training in pediatrics and noted such distinct ways in which children, adolescents, and their parents would have these same overall patterns of feeling, thinking, and acting, I began to wonder about the developmental origins of this organizing aspect of the mind, our personality, and what role it played in our lives as we moved toward or away from wholeness and health. Why did an individual act in such enduring ways? Why were there patterns of personality that seemed somewhat distinct across individuals? What were they made of, and why did they endure? When I transferred over to psychiatry to complete my clinical education, I was able to learn that attempts to find meaningful links between later aspects of adult personality and what I had learned in pediatrics about the early emotional and behavioral traits of a child, what we could observe in their ways of interacting with others, characteristics that were often simply named temperament, were for the most part not successful. These traits seemed to be present early in life. Perhaps we could call them inborn or innate. Some temperament traits might have a dominant influence from genetics. Others might be shaped by in utero neural development. Still others might be a direct impact of random physiological variables. We'll use this term temperament to refer to early features and early propensities, like reactivity, sensitivity, rhythmicity, for the kinds of processes that can be seen in the first years of life. Whatever their origins, the notion of temperament was a useful construct to acknowledge that not all variables shaping a child's development were caused by the child's relationship experiences with their attachment figures, most often but not limited to the parents, or other potential experiential sources of stress. Yet children need to develop adaptive strategies to survive. And might these be some ways in which temperament and early experiences, including attachment, influence the pathways a child takes? After my clinical training in adult, adolescent, and child psychiatry, I chose to pursue a National Institute of Mental Health Research Training Fellowship in which I was able to study attachment. The empirical study of attachment, sometimes known as attachment theory and research, would later demonstrate how temperament generally does not influence attachment patterns in a statistically robust way across each of the different attachment strategies. In fact, a child with one set of temperament traits could have multiple forms of attachment, each with a different caregiver. Personally, that made sense to me as a new father. Professionally, as a young psychiatrist just building my practice of psychotherapy with children, adolescents, adults, couples, and families, it helped distinguish between the later acquired learnings and the early inherent features of a child. From a practical point of view, this distinction between inborn temperament and experiential adaptations helped clarify how later acquired learnings built on top of early innate features of a child. This distinction also made sense to me as a scientist. In medical school, my neuroscience professor, David Hubel, M.D., was awarded the Nobel Prize, along with Torsten Wiesel, Ph.D., for demonstrating how experience shapes the brain. That same year, 1981, that prize in physiology or medicine was also given to Roger Sperry, Ph.D., for demonstrating the innate asymmetries in the human brain. What those prizes recognized were two fundamental principles. The brain is shaped by experience, and the brain has structural and functional proclivities that are innate. Naturally, experience will interact with neural structure and influence it based on the innate functional propensities of that nervous system. Experience is sometimes labeled nurture, while the inborn features, sometimes genetically influenced, are labeled nature. The old debate of nature versus nurture dissolves away to yield the current thinking that nature needs nurture and nurture molds nature. It is not an either-or, but rather a both-and process. Understanding this finding is essential for effective psychotherapy, and helpful in simply being a human navigating through the inner sea of the mind and negotiating our ways in the world across the lifespan. Temperament and personality in psychotherapy. You might imagine or even experience yourself, if you're a clinician, how these scientific ideas inspire questions about how personality forms, what it is made of, and what we can do with these enduring patterns of feeling, thought, and action in our lives. Yet it may seem strange to find, if you are not in the field of mental health, that a survey of numerous professionals in this discipline reveals that few of us are offered a clear view of how temperament and attachment influence personality in such a way that we can either understand these developmental pathways or do something with them in the clinical work we do. Even yesterday I asked, yet again, a group of clinicians if they'd been offered anything in their training about how to work with personality in therapy, with the familiar outcome of not a single professional answering yes. Certainly there are many therapists who focus on personality as personality dynamics or even study the Enneagram system. But a science-based neurobiologically informed developmental model of personality and its use in psychotherapy is rarely, if ever, offered in the traditional training of mental health practitioners. My own education in psychiatry focused only on personality disorder, not personality itself. Understanding the nature of personality can be a foundation for offering more effective ways of helping people thrive. While there is a large amount of academic literature studying personality, the applications in psychotherapy are often not readily available. One possible reason for this is the often held belief that personality is just what you have. There is nothing that can be done to change these traits. Ironically, if we think that these patterns we call personality are fixed, they may remain unchanged. Yet, if we imagine that they can change, at least to various degrees, they may in fact be open to modification in our lives. This relates directly to the findings of Carol Dweck that our fixed or growth mindset can determine whether we can grow and change or not, which means that being open to change is itself the beginning of being able to change. But what is it exactly that we are trying to change if we are working with personality? Work in psychotherapy around issues related to personality evokes the teachings embedded in the Serenity Prayer. May I have the courage to change the things I can, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. What in fact is changeable and what is not? And for those aspects of our personality that can change, how would we change them, and why would we even want to? We may not be able to alter a baseline set of features of temperament to a large degree, but we can transform the adaptive strategies that may emerge from them that form our personality patterns. As a student of therapy, I became fascinated with how we develop into who we become. How might we learn to accept our innate nature while also changing those adaptive strategies toward wellness? And what does it truly mean to be well, to be whole? The study of personality in the empirical field of psychology has revealed some fundamental principles that may surprise those who've learned only the popular view of the topic. One is that rather than a commonly held notion of types that fall into distinct categories, research in fact suggests we have personality traits that are characteristics that fall along a spectrum of values. A second finding is that popular approaches that postulate types, such as the Myers-Briggs type indicator, do not hold up with close empirical scrutiny. In contrast to popularized notions of personality, a carefully collected set of data across many cultures with large numbers of research subjects revealed universal linguistic terms that ultimately could be seen as belonging to one of 5 general and seemingly distinct traits. This, we've seen, is the ocean view of the Big 5 personality traits. A third finding is that we all have these traits, and that not only do they vary along a continuum of values, but they can be changed with development and effort. As far as we can tell, there is no clear developmental pathway in the Big 5 or any other personality system that helps us see how to apply these important features of personality to the process of understanding how early traits, what we are naming temperament, move forward in our lives to become both childhood and adult personality. The importance of temperament in general for predicting adult outcome may be an intuitive sense many of us have, and is supported by an extensive research analysis by Wright and Jackson. We tested the predictive validity of childhood personality for life outcomes up to 30 years later. 2 main findings emerged. First, temperament measured between ages 0 and 6 was able to predict a wide-ranging number of life outcomes. Second, temperament often provided incremental predictive validity above adult-based personality, suggesting that there is unique information in childhood assessments despite being assessed farther away in time. These findings establish the importance of both distal and proximal personality predictors of outcomes, supporting the need to understand who an individual is throughout the lifespan. For a set of traits that were measured between infancy and age 6, the ability of temperament to predict outcomes in adulthood decades later was noteworthy. Our temperament assessments, completed at an average age of 3.76 years, lends support that personality can be measured early on in life and have predictive validity for important life outcomes decades later. Our wide-ranging array of outcome variables further supports the broad and far-reaching predictive abilities of childhood temperament. Thus, our study indeed found that early assessments of temperament are associated with a broad array of outcomes up to decades later. Using a large-scale longitudinal study across a 30-year time frame, we identified non-redundant predictions of life outcomes for temperament and personality. Temperament explained the most variance for outcomes such as cognitive ability and educational attainment, whereas personality performed best for outcomes such as health status, substance use, and most internalizing outcomes. Our results highlight the benefit of a lifespan approach to understanding life outcomes, where adult-based outcomes are informed by child-based assessments. Our hope is to offer some possible insights that are therapeutically useful into how early childhood features of temperament and personality may continue through adolescent development and shape adult personality. Even in Jerome Kagan's study of behaviorally inhibited children and their growth into early adulthood, The ways parents raised their children directly impacted how a given individual would retain the essential manifestations of that inhibition or grow beyond them. Children who had passive or unstructured parenting and those with authoritarian parents retained their inhibition to engage in new experiences. Those with authoritative parents, caregivers who tuned in to the child's particular temperament and experience, could learn, with their parents' support, how to feel their fear and move out into the world despite its presence internally. In this way, we can see how supportive experiences can influence how a temperament trait is manifested outwardly, even though, as the research found, the sensitivity of the brain, in this case of the amygdala, remained in all the subjects. This finding has important implications for teaching parents about temperament and how to attune to their child's particular proclivities to optimize their development toward flexibility and resilience. One way to envision this is that the higher cortical structures could learn the skill of inhibiting the lower subcortical regions with their parents' connection and support. One of those subcortical areas, the amygdala, may have been especially sensitive to new experiences, creating a paralyzing sense of fear. But with attuned parenting, despite these innate temperament traits that may be subcortically mediated, a cortical override that was learned would change how that amygdala reactivity would ultimately be expressed as emotion, thought, or behavior as the child grew into adolescence and adulthood. In other words, this could be seen to demonstrate how personality might be a combination of subcortical temperament combined with cortical adaptive learning to create our patterns of personality. Since 2004, after we scientists who met at the week-long Enneagram workshop convened and came to name ourselves the PDP Group, we have worked to seek a way of understanding how that popular personality system might emerge from some empirically established mechanisms in various fields, especially those of attachment and developmental, affective, and social neuroscience. From this 2 decades-long endeavor, applying these new perspectives to old views, we have come to propose 3 key ideas of this Patterns of Developmental Pathways framework, PDP. Integration and the PDP as a clinically useful framework. Key idea number 1. The PDP breaks ground in the therapeutic world in 2 ways. First, it is more than a system of individual development and well-being. It simultaneously provides rapid insights into interpersonal relationships, what we can call wholeness between, and provides clients with a larger understanding of themselves, what we call wholeness of being. Second, the PDP provides insights and tools for working toward integration cognitively, emotionally, and somatically, a wholeness within. We believe the framework will 1. Help you become a more effective therapist by becoming aware of your own personality-based biases that can sometimes make it difficult for you to be with your clients in an open, receptive manner, so that you can become more present, attuned, and resonant with them. 2. Help provide your clients with a powerful framework for A. Understanding personality and its role in ongoing personal problems, and B. Making changes in aspects of personality that aren't supporting them in getting along well with others and better cultivating their own well-being. We call this working at their growth edge. 3. Acquaint you with a body of phenomenological knowledge, insights into how things unfold in our inner lives, that is beginning to enter mainstream psychology, and that we expect many of your current and prospective clients may already know about, regarding contemplative, psychedelic, and spiritual experiences. 4. Inspire you to pursue this inner understanding of personality by exploring it first within yourself, which will promote your own growth toward wholeness as well as enhance your therapeutic practice. Like us, you may find it profoundly helpful to find your baseline pattern, which is the pattern in your life that, up to this point, may have developed most predominantly. The PDP as a lifespan model of personality. Key idea number 2. The PDP framework fills an important gap in our understanding of personality in that it provides plausible hypotheses about how personality develops from temperament characteristics of infancy and emerges and is expressed throughout the lifespan as adaptive strategies. We provide a framework of personality that arises from 3 basic subcortical emotional motivational systems, combined with attention and somatic processes that, from birth and throughout life, help us shape adaptive strategies that become important aspects of personality. We present a simple framework that shows how three motivational systems combined with three attentional orientations describe 9 personality patterns, which we call patterns of developmental pathways. We provide an inside view of personality as PDPs, using the framework of interpersonal neurobiology, drawing especially from affective neuroscience, attachment research, and the mathematics of quantum physics and systems theory, to present what we see as a powerful approach for an in-depth understanding of individuals and their relationships with others. Unlike other personality systems in modern psychology, of which we are aware, the PDP approach provides powerful tools for development, growth, and change that can be readily used in psychotherapy. We propose that a set of patterns exists in which a collection of subcortical motivational networks forming early in life sets the stage for differences in 3 reactive tendencies that an individual will have a propensity to experience. These subcortical regions, related to emotion, motivation, and attention, interact with the cortex above them in a bottom-up way to influence the whole of the embodied brain, the nervous system distributed throughout the body, including its head, and shape our inner subjective sense of what matters and where we focus our attention. When we say patterns of developmental pathways, our hypothesis is that a pathway, specifying this reinforced network and its accompanying processing of emotion, cognition, and behavior, involves 1. Innate constitutional non-learned learnings and other early forming proclivities of the nervous system that are the biological basis of what we shall simply refer to as temperament, which 2. Recursively ingrain their own tendencies in a self-reinforcing positive feedback loop of activation, neural growth, and 3. Further activation that enhances the probability of this particular network or sets of networks being activated and becoming prevalent in a person's life as a specific pathway. Our hypothesis is that a personality's features arise from the cluster of motivation, emotion, instinct, cognition, and attention that would then make up the pattern of that developmental pathway. This is the basis of personality patterns as the patterns of developmental pathways we are abbreviating as PDPs. In various settings, we shall use PDP, patterns, and pathways as linguistic ways of referring to this set of propensities that cluster into what we call our personality. The PDP framework is a contemporary interpersonal neurobiologically based view of personality, with proposed hypotheses that can be challenged and refined both in future research and in clinical practice. The PDP is a framework for wholeness and integration. Key idea number 3. Wholeness is a term we were hesitant to use, as it is a word used in so many ways in the popular literature. People who feel fractured are far from wholeness. Those disconnected from purpose do not feel whole. Feeling out of touch with nature is feeling a loss of wholeness. Many approaches to psychotherapy not derived from scientific foundations may emphasize wholeness, integrity, and coherence, and we hope that this developmental approach to personality through the cross-disciplinary framework of interpersonal neurobiology will provide a complementary perspective of interest and utility in clinical work. With all the various meanings attributed to the term wholeness, wouldn't it be better to find another linguistic symbol for an experience of being that is free, content, connected, open, joyful, and even loving? Yet as we moved ahead in our work together, we found that in the tens of thousands of narratives David had accumulated of individuals who explored the journey toward change using a personality framework, wholeness was the linguistic term they chose to use in attempting to describe their experience of positive growth. I became whole. I felt at peace and complete. I was whole. I felt connected and joyful in the sense of wholeness that emerged. By using the term wholeness, you and I are challenged to be sure we have a shared understanding of its intended meaning, and by deciding to explore what the concept of wholeness might mean in our lives, how it relates to personality, and how it might be used in clinical practice, we also will be aided by attempting to be as specific as possible, so that the utility of the term and the experience we are trying to articulate are as specific as possible. Here is one way to proceed. We can suggest that when a human being experiences something that they name linguistically as being whole, the term may be referring to certain features that share some or all of at least these 3 qualities. 1. A state of being that is receptive, open, and capable of holding in awareness a wide range of emotions, thoughts, and memories with clarity and stability. This makes the term akin to the experience sometimes referred to as presence. Coherent, or the experience of being complete, might be apt summary terms. 2. An experience in which the sense of self expands and a feeling of being at ease and connected to something larger than an individual identity emerges. This makes the term akin to the states of transcendence that the emotions of awe, compassion, and gratitude are sometimes said to evoke. This could also be stated as a sense of an expanded feeling of one's identity and belonging. An integrative self we can call intraconnected. Connected is a summary term. 3. A flowing experience of harmony. This use of the term whole suggests that as a complex system emerges with a self-organizing process, a synergy arises in which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts and has the qualities of optimal self-organization, flexibility, adaptability, coherence, energy, and stability. This is the phasis flow that emerges with integration. The linkage of different...
We hope you enjoyed this preview. To continue listening to this audiobook on Google Play Books, use the link in the video description.